The quiet visit that wasn't so quiet. Keanu Reeves didn't tell anyone where he was going that evening. No cameras followed him. No press waited outside. He wore a plain black hoodie, jeans, and an old pair of sneakers. No one would think he was famous. That's how he liked it. The movie theater wasn't grand or shiny. It wasn't in Hollywood or in the heart of some busy city. It sat quietly on a corner in a quiet neighborhood in Vancouver. The sign above the door was small, old-fashioned, the kind that lit up one letter at a time. It simply read, Silver Sky Theater. What most people didn't know was that Keanu owned this place. Quietly, secretly. He had bought it years ago, not for profit, not for fame, but because it reminded him of his childhood, when he used to watch old films with his mother, back when life was simple, before the fame, before the loss, before the silence. Tonight, one of his older films was playing. Not a blockbuster, not the kind people screamed about. It was a quiet film, a personal one that didn't win awards, but touched hearts. He wanted to see how it felt after all these years. Not as an actor, not as a star, but as a man. He walked through the side entrance, greeted the staff with a soft smile. Most of them didn't even recognize him. He liked that too. He stepped into the lobby just before the next show was about to begin. And that's when he heard it. To girls, maybe 14 or 15, standing near the snack counter. They weren't loud, but they weren't whispering either. Why are we even watching this one? One girl said, It's so old. No one even talks like that anymore. The other girl laughed. My mom said the actor's deep or something, that he went through a lot. But I don't get the hype. He looks so regular. Keanu stood completely still. His heart didn't break, but something inside him paused. Not because they were being rude, but because it reminded him of something he had forgotten. Once upon a time, he had been that regular, that invisible, that boy who walked through halls and was never noticed. And now, even with all the love, the praise, the headlines, someone still saw him as just regular, and somehow that felt honest. He didn't walk over. He didn't correct them. He just stood there listening. And then the second girl said something that made his breath catch. I think he lost his baby or something, like in real life. What? The first girl asked. Double quotes. Yeah, I read it online. His girlfriend had a baby and the baby died or something. And then she died too. That's why he's always so sad. There was a pause. That's actually really sad. Yeah. Now I feel kind of bad for calling him boring. Me too. And then one of them said, maybe the movie's not even the point. Maybe it's more about feeling something. Keanu closed his eyes. For a moment, the world faded. These two young girls, who didn't even like the film at first, were now touching the very heart of what he had always believed. That movies weren't about looking cool or acting big. They were about feeling. He stepped into the shadows. Not because he was hiding. But because he didn't want to interrupt something real. As the girls grabbed their popcorn and walked into the theater, Keanu stayed back, leaning quietly against the wall. He didn't need their praise. He needed that moment. That reminder. He had spent so long trying to carry pain quietly, to stay humble, to never let his fame turn into pride. And here, in this tiny theater, to teenagers who didn't even know who he really was, gave him something he hadn't felt in years. Honest reflection. Just then, a staff member walked over. Sir, would you like to join them in the screening? Keanu looked at the theater doors, then shook his head gently. No, he said softly. Not yet, because what he had heard in the lobby was more powerful than any scene in that film. But what he didn't know was that the two girls were about to recognize him, and when they did, everything would change. When they finally saw him, the movie started. Inside the dark room, the screen lit up slowly. The audience sat in small clusters, mostly quiet, mostly older, except for the two girls sitting in the third row, just left of center. They munched popcorn and whispered now and then, their phones put away, more out of respect than habit. The film opened with a slow scene. Keanu walking down a rainy street, his coat too big, his eyes tired. The character was broken, lost, trying to find his way back to something he had forgotten. The first girl leaned over. He really does look kind of sad. Not just acting. The second girl nodded. I think. He's just being himself. Meanwhile, Keanu stood near the entrance doors, hidden in the shadows. He could see the screen from the side, just barely, but he wasn't watching the movie. He was watching the audience, watching how they reacted. Watching the two girls who had unknowingly reminded him why he started all of this in the first place. After about 20 minutes, one of the girls stood up quietly. She whispered to her friend, I'm getting water. You want anything? The friend shook her head. The girl stepped out into the hallway. Keanu moved back a little, hoping not to be seen. He wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. But life doesn't always wait for when you're ready. The girl turned the corner and walked right past him, then stopped. Her eyes squinted. She looked back. He didn't move. She took 2 slow steps closer. Wait, she whispered. Are you? Keanu looked at her and smiled gently. Hi, he said. She blinked, mouth slightly open. You're Keanu Reeves. He nodded slowly. I am. She just stood there for a second, then looked back toward the theater door, then back at him. You were listening earlier, she said. He smiled again. Yes. She looked embarrassed. Her face turned a little red. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound mean. I didn't know you were. He raised a hand gently to stop her. You were honest. And you weren't wrong. She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. I didn't really understand the movie at first, she admitted. You're not supposed to, he said quietly. Not all at once. She looked up. What do you mean? Keanu leaned against the wall. His voice was soft, slow. Some stories aren't told to be understood. They're told to be felt. Sometimes the meaning comes days later, in the middle of the night, in the middle of your own story. The girl didn't speak. Then she whispered. My dad left when I was 8, and my mom always says I don't talk about it enough. But I feel it, all the time, even if I don't say anything. Keanu looked into her eyes. Then you do talk about it, just in a different language. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry you lost your daughter, she said quietly. He gave a small nod. Thank you. She wiped her face with her sleeve and smiled a little. My friend is gonna freak out when I tell her I talked to you. Keanu smiled back. Maybe wait until the movie ends. She nodded and returned to the theater. Keanu stood there alone again. But something inside him had shifted. It had been a long time since he had spoken about his daughter with someone so young, someone who still understood the weight of silence. He decided to step into the theater and watch the rest of the movie. He chose a seat in the very back, away from the others, but with a perfect view. The two girls sat a little straighter when they noticed him, but didn't say a word. They just watched. And as the film went on, something happened. When his character on screen cried in the rain, the first girl wiped her face. When he held a letter with shaking hands, the second girl quietly reached for her friend's hand. Keanu watched them feel the story. Not understand it, not analyze it. Just feel. And near the end of the movie, during the soft piano music and final monologue, something beautiful happened. The girl he had spoken to turned around, just once, and smiled. Not a fan smile, not an excited one. Just a soft smile of understanding. Like they shared a secret now. But that night wasn't over yet. After the credits rolled, as the audience filed out, the theater manager approached Keanu with a worried look. Sir, there's a man outside. He says he knew you a long time ago. He's asking to speak to you privately. Keanu frowned slightly. Did he give a name? The manager nodded. Double quotes. Yeah. He said his name is Jake. Jake Morris. Keanu froze. The name hit like a wave. He hadn't heard that name in over 25 years. Jake was once his closest friend, but they had parted on bitter terms. Something had happened back then, something painful, something he never spoke about. And now Jake was here, waiting outside his own theater, and Keanu had no idea why. The ghost at the door. Keanu stood in the dim hallway of the Silver Sky Theater, heart strangely heavy. The name Jake Morris echoed in his mind like an old song you don't expect to hear again. He hadn't seen Jake since they were in their early 20s. They were best friends once, brothers without blood. They had shared everything: laughter, dreams, heartbreaks, until something shattered it. Keanu remembered that night clearly. A phone call. A fight. A goodbye that came too fast, too loud, and too final. And now where Jake was outside. Keanu took a deep breath, nodded at the manager. It's okay. Let him in. A few moments later, the lobby doors opened, and there he was. Jake looked older, of course. Gray streaks in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his posture was the same, strong, guarded, like someone who had fought life but didn't always win. They stared at each other for a few long seconds. Then Jake broke the silence. You haven't changed much. Keanu gave a small smile. You have. Jake chuckled, but it wasn't a happy sound. Timed as that, he said, and regret. Keanu motioned toward the small side cafe inside the theater. Come on, let's sit. They walked in silence and sat at a corner table. The cafe was empty. The staff had already started cleaning up for the night. Keanu folded his hands on the table. So, he said gently. Why now? Jake looked down. His fingers played with a napkin. I saw the interview, the one with Oprah, and I saw the way you talked about loss, about love that doesn't die, and it brought back everything. Keanu waited. I never told you the truth, Jake said quietly. About why I left, about what happened that night. Keanu's face stayed calm, but inside, something stirred. Jake continued. I got scared. You were going places, man, movies, scripts, people wanting your time. And I was just the guy holding a camera, your shadow. Keanu frowned. You thought I was leaving you behind. Jake looked up. His eyes were red now. No, he said. I knew I was leaving myself behind. I was jealous, bitter. And when you got that big offer, instead of being proud, I felt small. Keanu looked away. A silence fell between them. Then Jake whispered, and when your daughter died, I wanted to call you. I picked up the phone 100 times. But I thought, after the way I left, maybe you didn't want me anymore. Keanu turned back slowly, his voice soft. You were my brother. Jake nodded, and I broke that. Keanu leaned back, breathing deep. You didn't break it, he said. You just stepped away from it. Jake wiped his eyes. I've spent years thinking about what I could have done different. But tonight, when I saw you walk into the lobby, and then heard those two girls talking about your story, I knew I couldn't run anymore. Keanu was quiet. Then he said something that surprised even himself. Do you want to come back tomorrow? Jake blinked. What? Come back, Keanu said. Spend a day here. The theater's small, but it needs people who care. And I think you still do. Jake looked down again, overwhelmed. Why would you forgive me? Keanu gave a tired smile. Because someone once said to me, love doesn't live in bones, it lives in moments. This is a moment. I don't want to waste it. Jake didn't reply. He just nodded, slowly. And Keanu reached across the table and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. No more words. Just silence. But it was the kind of silence that heals. Later that night, as Keanu walked back through the empty theater, he paused outside the projection room. He opened the door, looked at the empty reels, and thought of Jennifer, of their daughter, of how many nights he had stood alone in rooms like this, wondering if the pain would ever end. But it hadn't ended. It had transformed. And now, instead of breaking him, it had begun to build something again. Just then, a soft knock came from behind. It was the same girl from earlier, the one who had talked to him in the hallway. She held something in her hand. I wrote you a letter, she said shyly. Keanu took it gently. Thank you. She looked down, then back up. I think your movie made me understand my own story better. He smiled. Then it did its job. She turned to leave, but stopped. You're not what I expected, she said. You're more. And then she walked away. Keanu opened the letter right there, under the soft lights. Inside was one sentence. Thank you for making sadness feel like something beautiful. He folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. Outside, the wind moved gently through the night. But Keanu stood still, because tomorrow, something unexpected would arrive at the theater. A letter. Not from a fan. Not from Hollywood. But from someone he never thought would reach out again. Someone who still carried pain too deep to speak. Asterisk the letter with no return address. The morning air was crisp when Keanu arrived at the Silver Sky Theater. The street was still quiet, the sun just beginning to stretch over the rooftops. The same girl from the night before had drawn a small chalk heart on the sidewalk. It made him smile. Inside, the theater smelled of fresh popcorn and coffee. Jake had arrived early too. He was sweeping the lobby, headphones in, moving slowly but with purpose. Keanu gave him a nod. No words were needed. Their friendship, once broken, was quietly beginning to mend itself. By noon, the mail had arrived. Just a few envelopes, a flyer, and one small brown package. No return address. Keanu opened it with calm fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter, folded with care. No name signed at the bottom, no clue who sent it. But the first line made his heart stop. I saw your daughter once, and I never forgot. He sat down slowly in one of the theater chairs. The world outside faded. The letter continued. I was a nurse, not her main nurse. Just someone passing through the ward that night. Your daughter wasn't moving much. The machines were quiet, and you were asleep in the chair beside her. But something happened. She reached out, only for a second. Her fingers touched yours, and even though her eyes never opened, I saw something in that touch, like a goodbye, like a thank you. I don't know if you felt it in your sleep, but I saw it, and I wanted you to know that she knew. You were there. I've carried that moment with me for years. I never forgot it. I lost my own daughter the year after, and when I was drowning, your quiet strength became something I remembered. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know she didn't go alone. Keanu sat in silence. He remembered that night, how he had fallen asleep holding her hand, exhausted from crying, from hoping, from pretending to be strong. He had always feared she slipped away when he wasn't watching. But now he knew she had felt him. She had said goodbye in her own way. He folded the letter carefully. His hands shook a little. He walked over to the small cabinet near the back office and opened a hidden drawer. Inside were mementos, photos, notes, the little things he kept that no one else ever saw. He placed the letter inside, on top of all the others, because this one was different. This one gave peace. Later that evening, the theater hosted a small screening for local high school students. Not for money, just for connection. A quiet film about grief and healing. Keanu watched from the back as they laughed in parts, grew still in others. After the film ended, a few students stayed behind. One of them approached him nervously. A boy, maybe 16, with messy hair and sad eyes. I don't usually like old movies, he said, but this one, it made me think of my grandpa. He died last year. Keanu nodded gently. Did you get to say goodbye? The boy shook his head. I was mad at him. We fought the week before. Then he got sick, and it happened so fast. Keanu sat on the armrest of a nearby chair. Sometimes, love waits for us, even after the person is gone. It doesn't hold grudges. It just wants us to be okay. The boy looked down. My grandma says she still talks to him. Keanu smiled. Maybe she's not talking to herself. The boy chuckled softly. Maybe, and then he left. One by one, the theater emptied out. But the message stayed. Keanu walked into the projection room again. The same spot where he had stood nights before. On the wall, pinned behind a dusty schedule, was a small photo. A black and white picture of the original owner of the Silver Sky Theater, a man named Walter, who had opened the place in 1906. Keanu had met Walter once, when he bought the theater. Walter was already old, his hands trembling, but his memory sharp. He had told Keanu, people don't come to watch movies. They come to feel something that they can't say out loud. Keanu hadn't understood it back then, but now he did. Hours later, Keanu sat alone in the lobby, sipping tea. The lights dimmed. Jake sat beside him, flipping through an old film schedule. Then Jake said something unexpected. You ever think about doing another one? Keanu raised an eyebrow. Another what? Movie. But not the usual kind. Something real. Something. From this, he paused, from your life. Keanu looked down, then back at him. I don't know if anyone wants that. Jake shook his head. They do. They just don't know it yet. Keanu didn't answer, but the idea sat in his chest like a seed. Maybe there was a story left to tell, not one filled with action. But one filled with truth. But as they sat in the quiet theater, the door suddenly opened. A woman stepped in, holding a small envelope. She looked around nervously, then walked up to Keanu. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't want to bother you, but this is for you. Someone asked me to deliver it." Keanu took the envelope slowly. On the front were just four words, "She forgives you now." His hands trembled. He opened it. Inside was a single page, and the name signed at the bottom made his heart drop. He hadn't heard from her in over a decade, and she was the last person he ever expected to forgive him. The woman he thought was lost forever stared at the letter in his hand. The handwriting was soft, careful, the kind of writing that comes after deep thought or deep pain. He sat in the theater's empty cafe, the envelope torn open beside him, his tea now cold. Jake had gone home. The lights were low, outside. Rain tapped gently on the windows. He unfolded the page. "Keanu, I don't know how to begin this. Maybe because for so many years, I swore I never would. You hurt me, but more than that, you disappeared when I needed you most. I know you were in pain too, but I needed you, and you weren't there." His heart squeezed as he read. "I blamed you for everything. For her death, for the silence after, for the way I had to carry grief alone. But I watched your interview, and I saw the man you are now, the quiet, honest man who doesn't pretend to be strong, the man who still carries love in silence. And I realized you didn't disappear because you stopped loving her. You disappeared because you didn't know how to survive without her." His eyes began to fill. "So I forgive you, and if she were here, I know she would too. Maybe she already has. You don't have to write back. This isn't about starting over, it's about letting go. Thank you for keeping her memory alive, in your silence, in your films, in the theater you built from your heart. I see it now. Goodbye, Keanu." Clara whispered her name aloud. Claire. Jennifer single quotes S sister. They had once been so close, almost like family, until the grief pulled them apart, like two people drowning on opposite ends of a storm. He hadn't seen her since the memorial. He had always blamed himself, not just for losing Jennifer, but for not knowing how to hold on to Claire when everything fell apart. And now, this letter, this quiet note of forgiveness. Not asking for anything, not wanting anything. Just giving peace. Keanu folded it gently and placed it next to the letter from the nurse. To voices from the past, both coming back to say, "You are not alone anymore." The next day, Keanu arrived early at the theater. He walked the halls slowly, touching the walls like they were old friends. The theater had become more than a building to him. It was a mirror, a place where the past and present could sit in the same seat and watch the same story. Jake met him in the lobby. "You okay?" he asked. Keanu nodded. "Yeah, just carrying a lot today." "You want to talk about it?" Keanu paused. "Not yet, but maybe soon." That night, they hosted a small screening of a documentary about healing through art. People came quietly, holding coffee, wearing soft expressions. Most didn't know Keanu would be there. He sat in the back row. As always, the film ended with a quote on the screen: "Grief never ends, but neither does love." After the lights came up, an elderly man in the front row stood and turned to face the small crowd. "I lost my wife last year," he said. "She loved this theater. We used to sit right here. Same seats, every Friday night." He smiled through tears. "I kept coming back because this place still feels like her. And tonight, I think I felt her hand in mine." No one clapped. No one needed to. Keanu stood slowly, walked down the aisle, and gently placed his hand on the man's shoulder. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. The man nodded. "Thank you for giving us a place to feel again." Keanu didn't reply. His heart was too full. Later, he and Jake locked up the theater together. As they stepped outside, the air was cool, the streets empty. Keanu looked up at the stars. "I've been thinking," he said. Jake leaned against the doorframe. "About what?" "The story you mentioned, the one you said I should tell." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Yeah," Keanu nodded. "I think it's time." "You sure?" "Not really," Keanu said with a small laugh. "But maybe stories don't wait for you to be ready. Maybe they just wait for you to be honest." Jake smiled. "So, what's the first scene?" Keanu looked out at the street, then down at the chalk heart still drawn on the sidewalk. A man walks into his own theater. he said. Just looking for a movie. But instead, he finds something he lost, and somewhere deep inside, Keanu felt it. Not a voice, not a vision. Just a warmth. A presence. Like love, sitting quietly beside him. But the final piece of his healing was still to come, because the very next night, someone from his past would walk into the theater unannounced. Not Jake. Not Claire, but someone he thought had completely disappeared. And with her came one question that would change everything. The question he never saw coming. Next evening, Silver Sky Theater glowed softly against the night. A quiet hum filled the air, the kind that always came just before a screening. People were settling into their seats, warm popcorn in hand, soft chatter echoing through the halls. Keanu stood near the back door, not in the mood to sit tonight. He watched the projector flicker to life, listened to the hum of the film beginning, and took a deep breath. It had been a heavy few days, but peaceful. He didn't know that peace was about to be interrupted. The front door opened gently. A woman stepped inside. She wasn't young, but she wasn't old. She wore a green sweater, her brown hair tied in a loose knot. She looked around as if searching for someone or something, then spotted Keanu. Her eyes froze on him, and something in his chest tightened. He knew those eyes, but it couldn't be. He stepped forward slowly. "Lena?" She nodded. "Hey, Keanu." He hadn't heard that name in nearly 20 years. Lena was once a journalist, not the kind that hunted for drama, but the kind that cared about people. Years ago, she had interviewed him during one of his most difficult moments, after Jennifer's passing. The article she wrote didn't chase gossip. Instead, it painted him as human, broken, gentle, real. They had spoken only a few times after that, and then she vanished, until now. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you'd even remember me." Keanu gave a faint smile. "I remember everyone who treats grief with kindness." She looked down, then back up. "Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" He nodded. They stepped into the small cafe room, empty now except for a dim light and 2 old chairs. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lena spoke. "After that article, I couldn't write anything else. Not really. I kept thinking about you, about your story. I thought I was just doing a job, but something about that interview, it stayed with me." Keanu said nothing. He waited. "Last year," she continued, "I lost my son. He was 12, heart failure. One day he was running through the yard, and the next day," her voice cracked. She paused, gathered herself. "I stopped writing, stopped going outside, stopped believing." Keanu's eyes softened. "I'm so sorry." She nodded. "Thank you." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded notebook. She handed it to him. "I started writing again, not for newspapers, not for anyone, just for me, and maybe for you." Keanu opened the notebook. The first page read, "A man walks through the theater of his past and finds the audience he never expected, himself." He smiled gently. "This is beautiful. It's your story," she whispered, "but also mine." Keanu closed the notebook, holding it carefully. Then she looked him straight in the eye and asked the one question he never expected. "Do you still believe she hears you?" His breath caught. He didn't answer right away. Outside the cafe, the sound of the movie swelled, a soft piano theme that matched the tone of the moment perfectly. He looked at Lena. "Yes," he said finally. "Not always, not every day, but sometimes when it's really quiet, when the world slows down. I feel her." Lena's eyes welled. "I hope that's true," she said. Keanu leaned forward slightly. "I think it's true whether we believe it or not. Love doesn't ask us to prove anything. It just stays." They sat in silence again. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was full, like sitting in the dark theater while the credits roll and no one wants to get up yet. A week later, the theater hosted a special event. Not a movie, not a premiere, just a gathering. They called it a night for the ones we miss. People came and brought photos, letters, items that held meaning. No one gave speeches. They just lit candles, shared smiles, held hands. Keanu read a short passage from Lena's notebook. Then he placed a small candle near the front stage. Beside it, he left 3 things: a tiny baby shoe, a folded note from the nurse, and Claire's letter message was clear. They were still with him. And now, he wasn't carrying them alone. Years passed. The Silver Sky Theater became more than just a building. It became a home for healing, a place where movies and memories danced side by side. Keanu kept visiting, not for the spotlight, not for the past, but because in that quiet space, he remembered something vital. That grief was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to be shared. And love, the kind that survives storms and silence, was never really gone. Just transformed.